Welcome to our 2024 Science Indicator presentation from the Accountability Development and Policy Analyst Unit here at the California Department of Education. My name is Michael Ishimoto and I will be co-presenting with Sarah Morrell. Today's session will be covering an in-depth review of the Science Indicator, and then we'll cover a few reminders about the dashboard in general. For the 2024 dashboard, the California Department of Education is releasing a series of on-demand sessions, which will be short, accessible videos, which can be accessed anytime and will cover each of the state indicators in more detail, plus other accountability information. Today's agenda includes an overview of the California School Dashboard, which we'll refer to as the dashboard from here on out. Next, we will cover all things Science Indicator, which includes current and potential measures, followed by an important review of the participation rate, a few frequently asked questions, general rules about the dashboard, and finally how to go about contacting or reaching us if you have any and all of your dashboard questions. First, we will start with an overview of the dashboard. The California School Dashboard is an online tool designed to help communities across the state access important information about transitional kindergarten through 12th grade. The dashboard reports how districts and schools are performing on multiple state and local measures that make up California's accountability system. In 2024, the dashboard will display performance through 7 state measures. They are academic indicators, which includes measures for both English Language Arts and Literacy, or ELA, and mathematics, English Learner Progress Indicator, Chronic Absenteeism Indicator, Graduation Rate Indicator, Suspension Rate Indicator, College Career Indicator, and now the Science Indicator. For our next topic, I'll turn it over to Sarah to talk about the specifics of the Science Indicator.
Thank you, Michael. The overview of the dashboard gives us a great introduction to the more specific rules and steps for calculating the measures of the Science Indicator. Let's begin. So what is the Science Indicator? First of all, it's a new indicator for the 2024 dashboard. The Science Indicator is based on the student performance on the California Science Test, or CAST, and the California Alternate Assessment, or CAA, for science. These are the summative assessments that are administered in grades 5, 8, and once in high school, or grades 10, 11, or 12. These assessments show how well students are meeting next generation science standards. Student scores are only included in the Science Indicator if the student is continuously enrolled. But what is continuous enrollment exactly? We use a lot of terms in accountability around enrollment, so let's clarify what we mean here. While cumulative enrollment is enrollment at any time during the year, continuous enrollment is defined as enrollment from Fall Census Day, or the first Wednesday in October, to the time of testing without a gap in enrollment of more than 30 consecutive calendar days. So if a student has a gap in enrollment of 45 consecutive days in the middle of the year, their assessment score would not be included in the Science Indicator. Keep in mind, that does not mean that they are not expected to test. We'll get into the participation rate and expectations to test a little later in the presentation. Since the Science Indicator is a little different from the other indicators and isn't self-reported, many people want to know, where does the data come from? The California Science Test and California Alternate Assessment for Science results are received from the testing vendor ETS. We also extract data from the California Longitudinal Pupil Achievement Data System, or CalPADS, to assist in our calculations. Specifically, the demographic data to make student group determinations, enrollment data to determine which students are included in the participation rate, and enrollment data to determine continuous enrollment to calculate the distance from standard, or DFS. A baseball card style graphic will be the first level of information available to schools and LEAs related to the Science Indicator. At the top of the card will be a Learn More button to view information on what the Science Indicator is. Below that, you will find 2 buttons. First, an all-student button, which will display results for that LEA or school. Next to that, you will find a state button. When selected, the card will display results for the state. Below those buttons will be a grayed out gauge. When it is full of color, it will show 5 different performance levels on the baseball card: red, orange, yellow, green, and blue. The gauge is grayed out because, as it states on the card below the gauge, there is no performance color in 2024 for any LEA, school, or student group. This text and a gray color gauge will be displayed on every science card. Below that will be information displaying the status results for science in points as well as change from the prior year. In this example, the entity status shows a distance from standard in the current year that was 48.3 points below standard. It shows the change from the prior year as an increase of 6.7 points. Finally, there is a link to view more details at the base of the card, which will take the user to more specific student group information on the second page of the dashboard. This dashboard card will be displayed on the main page as well as student group results on the secondary page. Additional information is displayed for the science indicator within the additional student group report. As we covered in the last slide, the View More Details link provides more specific student group data. The distance from standard is also reported for a few extra student groups. These are reported for informational purposes only, and they are not included or used in state or federal support determinations. No color performance level is assigned. However, the status and change from the prior year and the number of students are reported. These additional student group reports are available for current English learners, or EL, reclassified English learners, and English only. In the examples provided, the current English learners had a status of 16.7 points below standard, maintained a number of points, and the number of students are listed. For reclassified English learners who have reclassified in the past 4 years, the status was 27.3 points below standard. Change shows that they maintained a number of points, and the number of students is also shown. The English-only group scored 22.7 points below standard, and again, the data for change and the number of students is shown. Current English learners are only those students who are classified as EL in CalPADS. It does not include any of the students who have been reclassified. The reclassified English learners include students who have been reclassified for up to 4 years. And English only are the students who are not classified as either EL or reclassified EL. Now I would like to pass it back to Michael to cover the calculations.
Thank you, Sarah. We have mentioned distance from standard in the past few slides, but let's back up a bit and find out what is the distance from standard, or the DFS. The DFS is used to determine the status for science. It is the distance between a student's score on the California Science Test, or CAST, and the threshold for the standard met achievement level. In other words, it is the distance between the student's score and the low threshold scale score of level 3. What does it mean for a student to be at scale score of level 3? The scale score ranges for the CAST vary by grade level. The CAST scale levels and ranges for each grade can be found on this slide and on the CAST website, which can be accessed through the note-taking guide. The scale score levels have the same performance level descriptions as English Language Arts and Mathematics summative assessments. However, the CAST scale scores are very different from the other summative assessments. The scale score table on this slide shows the performance level descriptions on the top row, which are standard not met, or level 1, standard nearly met, or level 2, standard met, or level 3, and standard exceeded, or level 4. Also tested grade levels on the first column. Now I will go over the scale score ranges for each grade. For the 5th grade, students with a scale score between 150 and 178 are in level 1. A scale score between 179 and 213 are in level 2. A scale score between 214 and 230 are in level 3. A scale score between 231 and 250 are in Level 4. For the 8th grade, students with a scale score between 350 and 377 are in Level 1. A scale score between 378 and 414 are in Level 2. A scale score between 415 and 432 are in Level 3. And a scale score between 433 and 450 are in Level 4. For the high school, which are grades 10 through 12, students with a scale score between 550 and 575 are in Level 1. A scale score between 576 and 614 are in Level 2. A scale score between 615 and 635 are in Level 3. And a scale score between 636 and 650 are in Level 4. Now that we know what the DFS and the scale levels are, how is DFS calculated? It's best to explain the calculation in 3 simple steps. Step 1 is to calculate the DFS for each student. As I mentioned earlier, this means referencing the student's scale score and measuring this distance to the bottom of Level 3 for their grade level and subject. Next, in Step 2, we calculate the average DFS for a school or district using all students' DFS values. The average DFS will be used to determine the status level for a school, district, or student group. Step 3 is to calculate the change based on the difference in DFS from the prior year. But what about those students who take this California Alternate Assessment for Science, or CAA for Science? How do we calculate their DFS? For the CAA scores, a crosswalk is created to convert levels of the CAA to correspond with levels on the CAST using a top of the scale range approach. This is quite simple, really. For levels 1 through 3 on the CAA, a student's score would be substituted with the top score point of the same CAST achievement level. All CAA achievement results will be converted to one of 3 scale scores for each grade in each content area. So as an example, if a CAA score is in Level 2, their CAST score would be at the top score for Level 2 on the CAST. There is a link in your note-taking guide to the levels and ranges for each grade on the CAA to aid in the conversion. This newly converted CAST score will be used to calculate the DFS for those students taking the CAA. Next, we will provide a general overview of how we measure status and change. The measure of performance for LEA schools and student groups on the dashboard is done by looking at 2 years of data. Current year data equals status. A comparison between the current and prior year's data equals change. It's the combination of status and change that determines color performance on the dashboard and is designated by receiving one of 5 colors: red, orange, yellow, green, or blue, with red at the lowest performance level to blue at the highest performance level. However, on the 2024 dashboard, the science indicator will not display a color and performance level. Status and change will be displayed for informational purposes only. Now let's talk about the participation rate. For the academic indicators, English, Language Arts, and Mathematics, the Every Student Succeeds Act requires that at least 95% of students participate in the assessment or a penalty will be applied. However, the science indicator is not included in this requirement for the 2024 dashboard. Even though the participation rate requirement is not part of the 2024 dashboard, the CDE does encourage LEAs and students to assess all their students. And starting with the 2025 dashboard, a penalty rule will be applied if less than 95% of students do not participate, similar to the academic indicators. In order to calculate the participation rate for 5th and 8th grade students, we apply the participation rate formula, where the numerator is the number of tested students, which is divided by the denominator, the number of students enrolled during the accountability testing window. In order for a student to count as tested, they must log on to one domain of the CAST or all 4 domains of the CAA for Science. The student does not need to complete the entire assessment. However, their scores will be included in the average DFS calculation, even if it isn't reflective of the score they would have achieved if they had finished the assessments. If not enough questions were answered and is no score generated on the cast, an assigned loss for their grade level will be applied. The denominator represents those students enrolled during the accountability testing window. Many rules are applied to determine if a student is considered enrolled at the school or LEA. Keep in mind that the participation rate rules and the denominator will be different from those used to calculate the average DFS. There are a few exceptions for special cases, such as medical. Students who miss school due to illness without a medical emergency flag or have a parent opt them out of testing are still included in the participation rate denominator. There are grace periods applied for students entering or exiting the school during the testing window, applied accordingly to the length of the LEA selected testing window. High school students need to take the CAST once in high school. Since students can take the CAST during the 10th, 11th, or 12th grade, the high school participation rate calculation will be different from the 5th and 8th grade participation rate calculation. As decided by the SBE at the July 2024 meeting, the high school participation rate will be based on a current year rate. For the high school current year participation rate, the numerator is the number of tested 10th, 11th, and 12th grade students in the current year. The numerator is divided by the denominator, which is the number of tested 10th and 11th grade students, and the number of enrolled 12th grade students enrolled during the accountability testing window in the current year. Similar to the 5th and 8th grade students, in order for a student to count as tested, they must log on to one domain of the CAST or all 4 domains of the CAA for Science. The student does not need to complete the entire assessment, however their score will be included in the average DFS calculation, even if it isn't reflective of the score they would have achieved if they had finished the assessments. If not enough questions were answered and there is no score generated on the CAST, an assigned loss for the grade level will be applied. For more information about the participation rate, please visit the link to the Science Technical Guide provided in the note-taking guide. Determining a school's accountability testing window is one of the first steps taken to finalize the participation rate denominator. Although LEA set their own testing window for the CAST and CAA in the TOMS Test Administration Setup module for the dashboard accountability purposes, CDE determines what is called an accountability testing window for each school in LEA. The accountability testing window for the dashboard starts when the first student at the school takes a test. Depending on the length of the LEA selected testing window, grace periods may be applied as well. Grace periods were developed to apply to certain students who transfer in and out around the testing start and end dates and to schools harmless on the accountability measures when there is inadequate time to administer the assessments. They are applied before, after accountability testing window according to the length of the LEA selected test window. If the LEA selected testing window is 14 days or less, there is no grace period applied. If the LEA selected testing window is between 15 and 30 days, one grace period is applied at the end of the window. Students enrolling in the school during the grace period at the end of the testing window are not expected to test. If the LEA selected testing window is 31 days or more, 2 grace periods are applied. One grace period is applied at the beginning of the window for students exiting the school at the beginning of the window, and one grace period is applied at the end of the window for students enrolling in the school at the end of the testing window. For some LEAs, many students are entering or exiting their school during the testing window. It can be very difficult to determine which students should or should not be tested. For accountability purposes, we've simplified the participation rate a bit to hopefully clarify any confusion. Students in transfer in or out of a school are expected to test if they are enrolled for at least one day during the accountability testing window. Before we close out our review of the science indicator, we wanted to review a few frequently asked questions, or FAQs, that we have received. What are the performance levels for science? Science on the dashboard will be its own indicator on the 2024 dashboard. Also, there will be no performance levels on the 2024 dashboard for science. Therefore, results shown on the dashboard will be for informational purposes only and will not be used for school or district accountability determinations in 2024. Why are the CASP reports not matching the results of the dashboard? The CASP reporting webpage and the dashboard are reporting results from the spring summative CASP testing. However, they do have a number of differences that will often not match. The CASP reports most student demographics based on data at the close of testing. However, the dashboard looks at systematic student demographics based on CalPAD's EOY submissions. The CASP results are based on achievement levels and includes all tested students. The dashboard results are based on a combination of the participation rate and distance from standard and may remove some test scores due to business rules applied. The CASP webpage reports those taking the alternate assessment separately from those taking the CAST, while the dashboard combines these results into one average distance from standard. The CASP reports the number of students tested, while the dashboard student scores are included only for those who are continuously enrolled, as previously stated. And finally, the District of Residence rules are applied to LEAs, which is unique to the dashboard. Now Sarah will cover the remaining FAQs.
Thank you. For our next question, a student left my school before the testing window opened, but they are still showing up in Test Operations Management System, or TOMS. Will this affect my participation rate? Many of our LEAs want to track their participation rate in real time with the goal of testing 100% of their students. The only tool that LEAs have to track their testing is through the TOMS completion reports. Unfortunately, these reports are not the same as the participation rate reports. TOMS is a great tool for looking at real-time testing rates within a school or LEA. However, the dashboard does not use the same inclusion-exclusion rules for the participation rate calculation. The CDE does not actually receive the testing data until the fall, after the testing has been completed, and LEAs cannot do anything to increase their testing rates. To answer the question more directly, students remain in TOMS at their last known CalPAD school. Therefore, if a student never enrolled in another California school, they will appear as needing to test in TOMS. Since these students left before the testing window opened, they will not be included in the numerator or the denominator of the participation rate on the dashboard. A student left in the middle of testing but did not start any of the assessments. Will I be held accountable for their test? If the student is expected to test and did not test, the school and LEA will be held accountable for their student not testing. If the student falls under any of the exemptions, including grace periods, and is not expected to test, the school and LEA will not be held accountable for the student not testing. A student left my school during the LEA selected testing window, but before we tested any students. Will they affect my participation rate? No. Students that exit the school before testing has begun are not expected to test and will not be included in either the numerator or the denominator of the participation rate. And finally, the last question we'll cover today. My school did not reach 95% participation on CAST. What will happen? At this time, the California Science Test is a part of the Science Indicator and not included as a measure on the Academic Indicator. While we encourage full participation on the test, reaching less than 95% for the science test has no impact on accountability for the 2024 dashboard. However, LEAs in schools will receive a loss if less than 95% of students are assessed on the CAST. More FAQs are available at the Science and Academic Indicators web pages and will be updated as we receive more questions from the field. This was our quick recap of the Science Indicator. If you need additional help with the Science Indicator, we have a few different resources available for you. All the links are in the note-taking guide. First, we have our California Department of Education, or CDE, Science Indicator webpage. This will be your go-to for any questions you might have about how rules are applied or examples. It contains links to everything technical and simplified, including a link to our technical guides. Next, we have the Additional Reports webpage. After the dashboard has been publicly released, the data will be updated for the 2024 dashboard. The Science Indicator data reports will give you more information that is not available on the dashboard. This additional information can be found in the Science Report and the Participation Rate Report. That is a lot of important information about the Science Indicator. I will pass it back to Michael to cover general rules about the dashboard. Michael?
Thank you again. Now let's walk through some general rules about the dashboard. First, we want to clarify a rule about charter schools that is unique to the dashboard. Because charter schools are treated as LEAs under the Local Control Funding Formula, or LCFF, their data are not included in their authoriser's dashboard report. This includes both direct and locally funded charters. We want to go through what the accountability and size thresholds are and how they will be displayed on the 2024 dashboard. Since science is unique for the 2024 dashboard, we'll use the science indicator results for our example. If the N size is 30 or more students in the denominator, then the performance level or color is usually reported on the dashboard along with status and change from the prior year. However, the science indicator will not display colors. On the card, there is an option to select the student group or compare it to the state student group results. In this first sample card, the white student group is selected and displays a gray color with text that says no performance color. The card shows a distance from standard or DFS of 14.3 points above standard and a change of 4.4 points from the prior year with an arrow pointing up. The number of students or N size is 101. And the science indicator will not be used for accountability purposes for 2024. If the N size on the 2024 dashboard for the science indicator is between 11 to 29 students in the denominator, then the card will look the same as student groups with more than 30 students. Only the distance from standard and change from the prior year are reported. This sample card, the Asian student group is selected and displays no performance color with a grayed out gauge and a DFS of 6.7 points above standard. It also reports a 1.6 point change from the prior year with an arrow pointing up. The number of students or N size is 21. There is an option to select the student group or compare it with the state student group results. Again, the science indicator will not display colors and will not be used for accountability purposes. The dashboard for less than 11 students is very limited in information. If the N size is less than 11 students in the denominator, then no data are reported on the dashboard to protect students' privacy. In this final sample card, the foster youth group is selected and displays no performance level, a grayed out gauge, and no data on distance from standard or change. The number of students or N size is 2. Similar to the other cards, there is an option to select the student group and compare it with the state student group results. There are, however, N size threshold exceptions to the rules. They apply to the foster youth, homeless, and the new long-term English learners, or LTEL student groups, as their end size thresholds are different at the LEA and school levels. At the district or LEA level, there must be 15 or more students in the denominator to be reported on the dashboard and held accountable for all the state indicators except for the science indicator, because science is not being used for accountability purposes on the 2024 dashboard. At the school level, there must be 30 or more students in the denominator to be reported on the dashboard and held accountable for all the state indicators except for the science indicator. For this exception, charter schools are treated as schools, not LEAs. Therefore, charter schools will need 30 or more students in the denominator for the foster youth, homeless, and LTEL student groups to be held accountable for all the state indicators except for the science indicator. And finally, the District of Special Education Accountability, or DSEA. The DSEA rule is applied to all available state indicators for students with disabilities who receive special education services at another district or county office of education. These students are sent back to the District of Residence, or DSEA, and are included in the DSEA's dashboard. All students with disabilities test results are sent back or reported within their district of residence. Therefore, the district where the student geographically resides is held accountable for their assessment outcomes, and that data are included in the district's science indicator. Please note that this rule applies to LEAs only. All schools, including charter schools, are held accountable for all students with disabilities. This rule has been applied since 2017 for the academic indicators and 2020 reporting of the graduation rate and CCI data on the CDE School Dashboard Additional Reports website. It was applied for all indicators starting with the 2022 dashboard. For more information, refer to the District of Special Education Accountability Rule for Students with Disabilities flyer on the Dashboard Communications Toolkit webpage. If you are interested in contacting us regarding any of the information we covered about the California School Dashboard, we are just an email away. Our email address is dashboard@cde.ca.gov. We also invite you to follow us on X at CDE Dashboard. Thank you for watching this on-demand video about the science indicator. Again, please contact us if you have any additional questions. Thank you.